Is it time for you to consider getting a commercial property for your business to operate from? There may come a time when you feel that you want to expand your business to a brick and mortar location, or maybe you're just tired of renting from someone else. Join us as we discuss some key facts to consider when purchasing commercial real estate. Hello, it's Michelle and Sean, and this is Profit Points. And today we are going to talk about commercial real estate. So, we get questions from clients a lot that have operating businesses, and they've gotten to the point where they either need a brick and mortar location, or they've been in a brick and mortar location. It's not enough size for them, or they're looking to not rent anymore, right? They're tired of renting. They're tired of paying their money out, it just kind of going out the window and not really seeing a huge benefit from that. So we have a lot of people that come to us and say, okay, well, I'm thinking about getting this commercial property or thinking about exploring commercial properties. What should I do? And it happens all the time, right?
Yeah.
So one of the things that we go through with them is how to initially get going on the purchase of this property, and then what are some of the benefits, right, that you can have by having a commercial property that you own. So let's get into this. Sean, should someone purchase a commercial property in their own names, in the business name, in a different entity? What is your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks. Generally, what I would say is you should always purchase the real estate in a separate entity all its own. And it should be in an entity, not like an LLC. So, and not a corporation or an entity taxed as a corporation.
So that would
So
be, let's just be clear on that. So we say yes for LLCs that are considered either partnerships or disregarded entities. We say no to S corporations, even LLCs that are potentially treated as an S corp for tax purposes. And we say no for corporations, right? So
right.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's where the yes and no come in.
exactly. And the when we talk about this, you want that real estate outside of the operating company. So if you have,
Mhm.
a manufacturing company or any sort of operating company that the business is using the real estate for the operations, you don't want to commingle the real estate and the operating business. A lot of that is for legal reasons, and that's where your lawyer can explain what the benefits are for that. But there are also tax reasons as well. So in the tax world, you're wanting to keep that real estate in a separate entity, so you have flexibility for maybe gifting ownership to other people, to your kids.
Mhm.
You don't put it in a corporation like because real estate is considered an asset that can increase in value over time,
Mhm.
like stocks or bonds, or they should anyway.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, right now we'll see.
right. Yeah. So you usually want to keep those outside of an operating entity. So because there's tax rules around it, changing ownership and stuff like that
Mhm.
could create a tax event without even selling the property. So you don't want to get involved in something like that.
Mhm. Mhm.
So
So one of the things that we tell people is if you're considering buying commercial property, you should be doing or purchasing the property in that LLC to begin with. A lot of question is, oh, well, can I buy it in my own name and then transfer the property? And the answer is, yeah, you can. But in a lot of instances, you're going to incur transfer costs, additional transfer costs, I would say,
right.
right? So you're going to incur um, fees or taxes for transferring the asset initially, when you first buy it, and then you could potentially incur those same transfer fees again, if you transfer them into the LLC after the fact. So identifying the fact that you want to get this property into a different entity up front, you want to do that in the beginning. You don't want to do that after the fact. It is something
Right.
that can be unraveled, but it's better to do it the first time, because then you are going to incur less in taxes and fees on
Yeah.
the transfer of the real estate.
Yeah. Anytime you're trying to transfer real estate, the title of the real estate from one name to another name in any way could incur additional fees and costs. So getting that title right in when you first purchase the entity, when you first purchase the real estate is a good idea.
Mhm.
I recently had a conversation with a client who is considering purchasing real estate, and it had a part commercial, part personal use that they were planning on. And at the end of the day, we thought that the commercial use was so minimal that we would just that we think he should just purchase it in the name of his own name instead of the LLC, because
Interesting.
he was going to use it for personal purposes. So if that changes in the future, he understands that there could be a cost to that, but
Right.
we didn't feel like it was necessary up front to do that.
Right. So, getting the property into an LLC has some benefits, and one of those benefits, by keeping the property in a different entity, is that your operating entity may, let's say you have two owners own that operating entity, and you have ownership percentages. It doesn't have to be 50-50. It's
Mhm.
whatever, was determined. You, the real estate, if in a separate LLC, doesn't have to be that same ownership. So you could have one person who has maybe more funding availability and wants to own more of the property, or maybe just own the property 100% in this LLC. It doesn't affect then the operating entity. So you can have different ownership of the operating versus the commercial real estate, depending on how you want that to play out. So a really good example is I have a law firm client that
Mhm.
owns, the law firm itself is owned, and it's the operating entity. It's owned 60, 2020. Okay. So there's three partners, 60% owner, majority owner, and then 20% owners. The real estate, though, however, was purchased, and that LLC is owned a third each. So they, it's a different structure, right? It's a
Yeah.
different entity structure, and that's something that they decided they wanted to have happen when they went to purchase the commercial property.
Right. Yeah. So again, the flexibility of having it in a separate entity, that it's there because you're not bound by the same ownership as the operating entity.
Correct.
Yeah, and that's a perfect example of what we were saying earlier.
Yeah.
And there's all kinds of scenarios where that can happen. We talk about when you're ready to sell the business, your operating business, do you want to keep the real estate and
Hmm.
rent it out to the new owners of the business or whoever may end up moving into that property?
Yeah.
So, having it in a separate entity, you don't have to sell the real estate when you sell your business. You could just want to hold on to it as additional income in your retirement years, or diversifying your portfolio of assets that you have, so
Hmm.
it's not all in the market.
Hmm.
So yeah, having that in a separate entity also allows you for future planning with regards to the sale of your business.
Yeah, that's a great point. Because you may want to hold on to the real estate and rent it out to someone else.
Mhm.
There's a lot of great discussion around passive income, and that may be the way that you go about building your own net worth to a greater degree.
Mhm.
And it real estate is pretty solid, other than maybe some fluctuations here and there, but over time, it's a decent investment. So, um, one
Yeah.
of the things that we talk about with people who have operating entities and then purchase commercial real estate is renting the property to the operating entity. Let's talk about that a little bit and that looks like.
Yeah. So, you know, typically when you get into these arrangements where your operating business is in a real estate that you own, you know, you would create a rental agreement with your operating business, and you know, we suggest actually having a real rental agreement drawn up with fair market value rent. So, and then that company actually pays your rental company, or you that a separate entity, rent on a regular basis. It provides deductions for the operating business, which could potentially save you taxes depending on how your
Mhm.
operating entity is taxed. And then on the other side, you would have income for the rent, but you would have deductions related to depreciation of the property and any other
Real
holding
estate
costs.
taxes or
Yeah,
mortgage interest, if there's a mortgage on the property, those kinds of
exactly.
things. Now, you can
Exactly.
also set up those rental agreements in various ways. There's a lot of times where rental agreements will be set up with a triple net lease, which means really the operating company is on going to pay nearly all the expenses that relate to the operation of the property, and then in that case, you know, all the expenses would fall onto the operating company with just, you know, maybe real estate taxes and mortgage interest on and depreciation on the um, commercial real estate property LLC.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, again, we suggest having an attorney draw up the documents
Mhm.
for all of these things. You know, to create the separate entity, to create these rental agreements. There may be even a loan from the operating company to the rental company in order to help fund the purchase of the property.
Mhm.
So there might be some commingling or you know,
Intercompany.
intercompany transactions that you have to kind of
Mhm.
you want to make sure that they're agreements in place for all that stuff is to
Yeah.
pass IRS scrutiny for some of that stuff.
Yeah, and you mentioned even about, you know, fair market value, and we have people that have had these properties and they're charging double or triple fair market value, and in many instances, let's talk about what the IRS thinks about that. You know,
Yeah.
we've both been under or help represent clients that have been in audit situations, and let's talk about what
Yeah.
the IRS has to say about all that.
Yeah. If like, as I said before, you could save taxes by renting the property back to the operating company. And the IRS knows that, obviously, and is going one doesn't want you to overstate those tax savings, so they require you to set the rent at a fair market value. So the fair market value would be, what would someone who is not related to you, a third party, what would they pay to rent that property? What's the average rental space in that geographic area for that
Mhm.
type of building, for that type of industry? You know,
Mhm.
what is that, all of that going for?
Mhm.
And you know, there's some fluctuation in there, and there's some room to maneuver on that, but you know, you want to kind of get a third party's perspective on that as to what they would pay,
Yeah.
and then set the rent at that rate. So
I've had people that have done their own research, you know, got
mhm,
quotes for various spaces that may be comparable,
mhm,
comparable rental spaces, and you know, have basically used that and kept that in their file as what the rent would potentially be for the property, and kind of had that in their perm files, so that when and if they were ever examined by the IRS, if it was ever in question, if it is reasonable, I say most cases the IRS is not going to fight it all that much.
mhm.
They have bigger fish to fry, but they would definitely examine if it looked odd,
Yeah,
if it was very odd for either the space that was there, or even at examination, if they dug into the agreement and it was just didn't make any sense why this number was being used. That's when you kind
Yeah.
of find yourself in trouble.
Yeah, and also if you aren't actually paying that rent, like is it just
Good
a book?
point.
Is it just a book entry that you're not actually um finishing that transaction by actually paying it, right? So
Hmm.
yeah, you got to have some exchange of funds there to help that whole
Hmm.
process.
And it can be very easy because you can set up, a bank account that is in the same place that you have your operating company and do a rent sweep every month to pay
Mhm.
rent. Makes it
Yep.
nice and easy for people. You don't have to physically write a check. It doesn't have to be a
Yeah.
physical invoice as long as you're following the agreement,
Yep.
the agreement, the rental agreement. And it doesn't need to be overly complicated, but that's the kind of stuff that they look at as to whether or not this is like a legit type of rental for that space. So
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, getting all your ducks in order with all the paperwork, and following through with actually making those transactions happen, whether it's the rent, the loans, all that stuff.
right, right. So anything else that people need to be considering when they're getting commercial property? I mean, we talked today about some of the ways that you need to purchase the property. We talked about building net worth and you could have potentially different ownership percentages and some of the benefits, and then also maybe even some of the pitfalls as it relates to, third party values and the IRS when it comes
Yeah.
to renting it back to the owner operating company.
Yeah, just one final thing I think is be prepared to have your business financials ready to if you need to get a mortgage, you're going to need your personal financials, you're going to need your business financials all put together to provide the lender, because they're going to ask for everything. not
Yeah,
ju-
that is
not just
accurate.
not just a business, because it's an owner operated entity. So you're going to have you're going to need down money, you're going to need all the financial um for the business and your personal to all
Yeah.
put together.
Yeah, keep that organized. And speaking of which, if you are struggling with your business financials and not sure where to go, you can take our masterclass, and that is at moderncpaonline.com/masterclass. And you get a free 24-hour access pass to learn the 3 big financial mistakes new business owners make and what to do next. We encourage everyone to kind of take this masterclass. It will provide some basic foundations. If you like this content, please be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell to get all of the latest releases. We thank you for joining us today on Profit Points.
Take care, everyone.